Gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my ranking of my personal top 10 Fourth Doctor stories. So this is a ranking of my, well, as I mentioned, my favourite, my top 10 Doctor Who Fourth Doctor stories. So, yes, these are the stories I just liked the best from the Fourth Doctor's era. Now, quick word of warning. First of all, there will be a couple of options on this list that a lot of people may agree with, and there may be some that some people disagree with. I also like to mention that if you have seen my ranking of the top 10 1970s stories, then you may know what the top 4 are. If you haven't seen that ranking, then spoiler alert for that ranking as well. My top 4 are exactly the same as that. So, spoiler alert for that, and if you've already seen that video, then that was a spoiler for this video. So either way, you've been spoiled for the top 4 have been spoiled for both lists, depending which version you see first, which list you see first. However, the other 6 are a bit more spaced out due to the 70s ranking, including some Third Doctor stories, hence, because it's covering the 1970s stories. This list also includes stories. This story is only on the Fourth Doctor stories from the 70s and his 1980s stories as well. So you've got stories from 1975 through to 1981. Before we start, the following seasons do not have a story in this list, and the following seasons are. Right, on the list, in the top 10 itself, there is no season 15 and there is no season 18. However, we do have an honourable and dishonourable mention I would like to start with, and one of these is from season 18. The other, as well as the top 10, the actual 10 list, are from seasons 12, 13, 14, 16 and 17. So, let's get started, starting with the honourable and dishonourable mentions. Dishonourable mention first, because let's start off with a bit more of a negative, then get positive, and then we keep getting positive as we go down. So, the dishonourable mention goes to a story that I recently rewatched, season 18, and I couldn't believe it, but I think we finally found the story that's almost as bad as the Space Pirates. And it's not Hellbent. It's actually worse than Hellbent, but not as bad as the Space Pirates. And this story is Season 18, Story 5, Warrior's Gate. I couldn't believe how bad this story is. As I've mentioned in that review and my Season 18 ranking, this story has hardly any plot. And when it does, it sort of ignores it or tries to move away from what something interesting trying to happen. Tom Baker and Lana Ward are literally the only people who try to actually care about it, maybe to a smaller extent Matthew Waterhouse and John Leeson, but that's about it. Some nice model effects, some decent visuals, only a few, most of them are quite naff, but that's about it. So yeah, for more reasons why I dislike the story, please check out my review of this story. I go into a full rant, even though I'm not shouting all the time, although for this story I really ought to have, but do check out the review for more reasons why I hate this story. But I will say I was surprised I hated it this much. So yeah, I also say that prior to rewatching, my dishonourable mention was originally going to be the season 13 story, Planet of Evil, because that one just pissed me off so much. I don't know what it was, it just pissed me off. But I will say that one at least tries to tell a story. Warrior's Gate doesn't even try to tell a story. Apart from the very few times that it does, but not long after that it would try and move away from that, whilst Planet of Evil just tries to actually tell the story And whilst I don't like that story, I think it does at least succeed in telling a story, whether I like it or not. Warriors Gate doesn't succeed in telling a story full stop, so yeah, that's a difference. That's why I like Clans of Evil more, because it at least tells a story, even though I get pissed off on it about the story for other reasons. But check out the review on that for why. But Warriors Gate doesn't even succeed in telling a story, so that's why that's the worst that's why it's the worst Fourth Doctor story for me personally. I know some people might say something like Leisure Hive or Haunted Nightman, Nightmare of Eden, Invasion of Time, Sunmakers, Underworld, or something. They might choose something else. But for me, it's the bloody Warriors Gate. Thankfully, Tom Baker's final 2 stories were much better, especially the second one, the penultimate story, which sadly does not appear on this list, nor has an honourable mention. The honourable mention, though, goes to Season 13, Story 1, Terror of the Zygons. I think this is a good, entertaining, fun story that has a great gothic feel with the Zygons. I think this is a fun story to introduce them, and it's a good story. It's a fun story. It can be a bit slow to start with, but it's still pretty good. I am a bit disappointed in the move to London for the final episode, but on a story basis, it makes sense. But I was having such a good time with it being set in Scotland, so yeah, Scottish fans delight in that remark. And yeah, it was a fun story and really good. And I can see the appeal of the Zygons on David Tennant, and later joining the new series. As well as with fans who, of course, also loved them, such like Tennant did. So, yeah, Terror of the Zygons, a good story. And also, this is how you do a companion's final story, Warriors Gate. This is how you do it. Although Harry's reason to leave just also kind of came out of nowhere, but it was better handled than Warriors Gates. Warriors Gates one. God, that ending was tacked on. So, yeah, Terror of the Zygons is a better final story for companion than Warriors Gate, even if the reason for them leaving is a bit, and does them just leaving full stop, does come a little bit out of nowhere. The best ones that are done are the ones that have build up to it, like Jo's, for example, in The Green Death. They actually build up her relationship with Cliff, and it works there. I would say the companion who gets the best exit in the Fourth Doctor's era is Sarah Jane Smith. They at least have that final scene to at least go into reasoning why she wants to leave. Other times it feels a bit tacked on or just isn't cooked well enough. So that's another reason why Sarah Jane's final scene is so good, because it's what they at least go into development on the reason why she wants to leave. They at least explain that and go into character development. Sadly, Hand of Fear will also not be on this list. So, on to the top 10 itself. Now, starting off, number 10 might be a story that some people would say should have been the honourable mention and should have swapped with Terror of the Zygons, as my number 10 didn't actually broadcast. Therefore, that should be the honourable mention and Terror of the Zygons be number 10. But personally, I just like Sharda more. Yep, number 10 is Sharda, the unbroadcast story from season 17. This story almost got a 10 out of 10 on the rewatch, but I decided to stick with the 9 that I had previously given it. Now, I have kept it on the top 10 list because I really enjoy this story. I find it a great story. I also kind of find it a bit underrated. Some people find it overrated. I find it underrated. I think it's a great story, and some great stuff to it. I'm not going to go out all out and say it's the greatest story of all time, or consider it a marvelous classic just because it was unfinished. I'm going to call it a classic because it's a classic story, a story for the classic era, as well as a classic story. I'm calling it a classic because it's so good, not because it was unfinished. It's because it's good. I'm calling it a masterpiece because it is a masterpiece for me, not because it's unfinished. It's like calling one of the missing Doctor Who stories a masterpiece just because they're missing. Well, you wouldn't say that about the fucking space pirates now, would you? Daleks Master Plan, perhaps, but not the fucking space pirates. Fuck that story. Sharda, on the other hand, is a great story, and I really enjoy it. Now, moving on to number 9. Now, from this point onwards, every single story on this list is a 10 out of 10. Sharda was the only one not to receive a 10 out of 10. It was a 9, same for Terror to Zygons. But from this point onwards, we are now into 10 out of 10 territory. I think the 4th Doctor has got the most number of 10 out of 10s of maybe any Doctor. I mean, I might have to compare with later incarnations, but certainly out of the first 3, he's got the most. At least 9. So let's jump into actually, yeah, this one is a 10 out of 10. Number 9 is a classic that a lot of people would love. The Brain of Morbius from season 13. Now, with the Brain of Morbius, I thought this was a really good, really well written gothic horror story that also developed into a bit of Time Lord lore before we saw the Time Lords again in Deadly Assassin. And I think it's a great story and with some great characters. And Morbius is a pretty of a deadly villain. I'm a bit disappointed he and Sutekh didn't get to appear in the 4th Doctor's flashback in Logopolis. But in the villain section at least. So that's a shame, but Morbius is still a great villain, and I really enjoyed him in this story, as is Solon, who is probably the Warlord would be Philip Maddox's best performance. Solon would be his second best performance, and yeah, he does a great job here. And the Sisters of the Flame are also pretty good, and yeah, and Sarah Jane is also great in this story. And speaking about Sarah Jane and season 13, number 8 is The Android Invasion, also from season 13. Now, Android Invasion, I actually didn't really find anything wrong with it, apart from a few dodgy visual effects. Hence, why I gave it a 10 out of 10. I think I almost gave it a 9 because of that reason. There wasn't any flaw. Besides dodgy visual effects, which is common, but I decided to just go with it. It's probably an unpopular opinion, but I think Android Invasion is one of the best stories of the era, hence its inclusion on this list. I think Milton Johns gives his second best performance in the show, following after Bennick in The Enemy of the World. The Krolls are an interesting design, if not amazing. Love the story about the androids, and it's also a bit more of an action-packed story. And I think Terry Nation can do non-Dalek stories really well, as evident with this story and The Keys of Marinus, which was my favourite story of season 1. And I think it's on my top 10 First Doctor story. I think it might have been 5th or 6th. I could be wrong. Me and edit department will go and double check that. And yeah, but I think this is a good story and has some good, great stuff going on. And yeah, it's handled really well. Number 7 is from the following season, season 14, and this is probably the best final story of a 4th Doctor season. This is the best season finale to a 4th Doctor series, if we disclude Sharda, as that was unbroadcast. Actually, including Sharda, it's actually better than that. So it's still the best. And this is The Talons of Wang Chiang. Yep, another great gothic horror story from Robert Holmes, this time actually being credited, as opposed to under a pseudonym, like in The Brain of Morbius. And he does a great job here. There is a few sort of racial errors concerning the Chinese people, and a couple of unconvincing rats. Giant rat props, but besides that, it's a really great, really interesting, really good story. A little bit too long, but I think it's the best handled of the 6-parter stories of this era, besides one that's coming up later on. But even then, that one sort of was a bit slow in places, whilst this one, I think it handles it a bit better. So yeah, Talons of Wang Chiang, a really great story. Number 6 is another android story, this time from a little bit later on, season 16 to be precise, and this is The Androids of Tara. I just had such a great time with this story. that it's shot up to very much near the middle of the top Fourth Doctor, the very best of the Fourth Doctor's era. Great performances, a great villain with Peter Jeffrey returning. He previously played a character in the Macra Terror, and now he's back, this time as a villain in this story, and he is great. And it's just a fun story, and it's my favourite of season 16, the Key to Time season. And I think that's where it reached its peak. I think it's also the peak of the Graham Williams era, minus Sharda, and also one other story that's coming up later on. But besides that, I think it's probably the peak of the Williams era, and I really enjoyed it and had a great time with it, and also fantastic location work. Did I just do a sill? He doesn't turn up until 2 Doctors' time. Oh well, anyway, moving on to number 5. Now, my which choice? Number 9 choice features a villain I mentioned. Morbius should have been in the, a bit disappointing not seeing him in the 4th Doctor's villain flashback in Logopolis, and I mentioned another villain, Sutekh, who is in this story. Number 5 is Pyramids of Mars, from season 13. My favourite story from season 13, Pyramids of Mars, is just a great, interesting and enjoyable gothic horror mystery, pseudo-historical adventure, and just handled really well. Going a bit more sci-fi in the last episode, but that's fine. It's all done interestingly and handled well. Sutekh is one of the best villains of all time, with Gabriel Wolf being a brilliant casting choice for this character, as well as also for the Beast in Series 2. But we'll get to that when we get to that. In the story, the Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit. But certainly as Sutekh, he is so brilliant. And it's just handled really well. I think this is one of Sarah Jane's best stories as well. And she's pretty brilliant having to hold a rifle. And she's really fun as well. And the bit with her and Tom Baker just turning around and walking away from a mummy within literally a couple milliseconds, that was just brilliant. That was improvised, and it was handled brilliantly. It showed how good their chemistry was together. I think Tom Baker does have some great chemistry with his co-stars, but I think it's Elizabeth Sladen that his chemistry with Elizabeth Sladen wins out, especially when it's just the two of them together without Harry, without Ian Martin. And why the 4th Doctor and Sarah Jane Smith is probably the best companion duo or team of the classic series, at least at this point. Maybe, and Sarah Jane's one of the best companions of all time. I do think Sarah Jane herself does get better in the new series than the Sarah Jane Adventures, but certainly at this point she is so brilliant, and I think it's the chemistry with the 4th Doctor that makes her such a great character. That's another thing Planet of Evil does well. It's the start of that chemistry and character development, although I think it does start a bit more properly with Pyramids of Mars, but Planet of Evil, it does start officially, but it's more so evident in Pyramids of Mars. So yeah, great way. Okay, now we're on to the top 4, and this is spoiler alert for the 1970s ranking if you haven't seen that, and if you have seen that, then spoilers from that one would have spoiled this one. Oh well, here we go, here goes nothing. Number 4, and this is my friend Jack McCulloch's favourite Doctor Who story of all time, The Deadly Assassin, from season 14. The Deadly Assassin is a really amazing story. It has such a great, it's just a great story, great characters in it. The Master is great as well. He's trying, and the plot about him trying to extend his life is great. Peter Pratt does a good performance, although I do think Geoffrey Beevers is even better in The Keeper of Traken, but at least we see more of Pratt. And going into The Matrix is all a great idea as well, and even the Gallifreyan politics stuff is actually well handled here. Part 1 does meander a little, but it's building up the story, it's setting it up, it's still fine, it's still handled well, and yeah, I think it's a great story, and it's brilliant, just absolutely brilliant. I can see why Jack loves this story so much. Number 3 is considered the all-time greatest Doctor Who story by quite a lot of fans, pretty much the majority. Although whilst I don't consider it one of I don't consider it the greatest of all time or one of the greatest of the greatest. I do consider it a very strong story, and it is Genesis of the Daleks from season 12. Yeah, Genesis of the Daleks. Wow, this is a great story. I wasn't as keen on it as before I rewatched it for these reviews, but certainly afterwards I am a fan of it. I did like it beforehand, but ow, fucking sneezes. But not as much as everybody else. Well, besides some other people who weren't so keen on it, some people less than me. But now I have joined the bandwagon. I still don't consider it the greatest of all time or one of the ultimate greatest, but it's still a really good story and has a really great stuff going for it. Maybe it's in my top 20, but it's not really top 10 or top 5 territory for me. Top 20, maybe 15. I'll have to think about it properly, but it's still a great story and just a really brilliant adventure. My top 2 are in my top 10 of all time. I think my number 1 might even scratch the top 5, actually. Yes, I think it does. But number 2 first. Number 2, but if the Fourth Doctor's penultimate story, The Keeper of Traken, was so good, it only makes sense that it mirrors the start of his tenure, with his second story being one of his greatest, The Ark in Space, from season 12. Just a great story. I love how part 1 is just setting it up. It's just the three main characters on their own, just plus some voices from the computers and the Wurin carcass. And it's just looking around. But it's not done boringly. It's a bit slow in some places, but it's still fun and enjoyable and entertaining, and it's great. And the other 3 episodes are also really good and have some great moments, and it's just really engaging, and also sets up the story arc that finishes with Terror of the Zygons via the Sontaran Experiment, Genesis of the Daleks, and Revenge of the Cybermen really well. I think it's just handled greatly, and Ark in Space is just brilliant. I can see why Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat, former showrunners of the new series, consider this their favourite story, respectively. Both of them consider this story their favourite respectively. So, yeah, as for number 1 is also a favourite story, this time of my friend Matthew Moyer, and who's also a fellow Universals, and this one, I think, does make it into my top 5 of all time. Yes, I think it does. If not, then it's number 6, but I think it's 5, actually. This story is from season 17, and it's the only story besides Sharda that I would consider good, or at least not mediocre or worse. The other stories I would consider mediocre or worse. This story is, however, the highlight of the Graham Williams era. It's the highlight of Douglas Adams as script editor, and it's a lightning in a bottle story, especially considering which season it's stuck in. It is, of course, City of Death. Now, this one is a very comedic episode, but it's the one that treats the comedy brilliantly. It's very adventurous, it's really fun, it's really engaging, and just has great moments. Duggan is a great supporting character. Scarlione, played by Julian Glover, is amazing, and Glover has such a dedication to the role. He's also Scaroff, as well as also this army guy, soldier guy, who's another Splinter, and quite a few other Splinters. There, the Countess and Herman and the Professor Travosky are also really great, with the latter being played by David Graham, who voiced a couple of Daleks in the 60s. And also Jerry Anderson, fans will know him as Parker from Thunderbirds, and also some other characters in the original series, but in the current Thunderbirds Our Ghost series, he's still Parker. And everyone's just brilliant in City of Death. Everyone puts their 100% effort into making a fantastic story, and it just works so brilliantly. Come to the point where, at the point of the first 18 seasons, City of Death is my favourite story of Doctor Who seasons 1 to 18. Just so good. I mean, that position, my favourite story of all time, is going to go to another story. Depending when we go through these reviews in the future, there are stories that are going to top that, top this story, and there's going to be other stories that will top this that don't quite reach that position. Come to the point where it comes to currently 5th overall, but it's still an outstanding story and has some really brilliant. Has a lot of brilliant stuff going for it. Plus, the location work in Paris is outstanding. For more thoughts and opinions on each of these stories, including the stories that I mentioned but aren't on the list, like Plans of Evil and The Keeper of Traken, please check out their respective reviews or the season rankings for more details on why I like, or in the cases of Warrior's Gate and Plans of Evil, don't like those stories. Hi, Nick from during editing. Just quickly, I just wanted to recap the 4th Doctor ranking list. So number 10 is Sharda, number 9 is the Brain of Morbius, number 8 is the Android Invasion, number 7 is the Talons of Wang Chiang, number 6 is the the Androids of Tara, number 5 is Pyramids of Mars, number 4 is the Deadly Assassin, number 3 is Genesis of the Daleks, number 2 is the Ark in Space, and number 1 is City of Death. Anyway, that's it from me. Thank you for watching this ranking on my top 10 4th Doctor stories, and I shall hopefully see you guys next time for Castrovalva, the start of the 5th Doctor's era. If K9 and Company, A Girl's Best Friend review on the Universal's channel, and its link video hasn't already gone up yet, then that's next, then Castrovalva. But in terms of Doctor Who, next up, Castrovalva, which kickstarts Peter Davison's era as the 5th Doctor. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. Really? There may be some beyond. P.S. Just go back and say Sharda. And I also number 5 features the other villain. Number 5, my favourite of season 13. Excuse me. Part 1 does meander a little bit, but it's just but Pyramid PS, I'd say, from that to add that at the end of after the Deadly Assassin, who is the 4th Doctor is off. Well, if the 4th Doctor ended on a great adventure like the Keeper of Traken, didn't end on it, but that was the Ark in Space. This story is from season. Actually, I forgot to mention the Ark in Space. Okay, just put that there.